They said the Alpha King would never waste a glance on an Omega like me. Not one born nameless in a border village, not one who smelled of river mist and foreign pine. I believed them, right up until the night he broke every law written in blood and stone, just to keep me breathing. I was sweeping ash from the tavern hearth when the soldiers rode in, cloaks dripping storm water, armor marked with the silver wolf of Stormbane. The room dropped to a hush. Every heart in Nightfern understood what that crest meant. Alpha King Kale. The ruthless, the merciless, the monster who had ended the Black Moon Alpha and scattered his heirs to the wind. By royal decree, the captain called. All unregistered Omegas step forward. My broom froze mid-sweep. The mark on my wrist, the faint crescent birthmark I always hid beneath leather, burned. Aunt Mara's warning rang in my head, never let them smell what you are. If the Alpha King finds you, you're dead. One girl stepped out sobbing. Another followed, shaking. I kept my head down. I'd learned to dampen my Omega scent with bitter herbs and fireplace smoke. But tonight the wind changed. A draft from the open door curled through the tavern, lifting my hair, stripping away the ash and lies. The captain's nostrils flared. His golden eyes locked on me. You, he said quietly. Come. Hands seized my arms. The broom clattered to the floor. The tavern keeper muttered something ugly about straight pups and cursed blood. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from whimpering as they dragged me outside into the rain. He was there. The Alpha King. Not on a throne, not in gleaming armor surrounded by courtiers. Just a tall figure in a dark cloak astride a midnight warhorse, hood shadowing a face carved in hard lines. Power rolled from him in waves, the kind that made wolves bow and Omegas instinctively want to curl close for safety. I fought that instinct. I'd heard stories. He burned villages. He tore out throats. He'd destroyed Blackmoon's Alpha. My village whispered it like a prayer and a warning. The soldiers pushed me to my knees in the mud. Unregistered Omega, my king, the captain said. Caught hiding. Name, the Alpha King said. His voice wasn't cruel. That was somehow worse. Ashlyn, I whispered. Omega. I work at the tavern. I've broken no law. Unregistered Omega blood is contraband, the captain reminded him. Law 13. She should be taken for processing. We all knew processing meant cages, collars, auctions. The Alpha King's hood tilted, as if listening to something only he could hear. His nostrils flared once. His hand flexed on the reins. Lightning split the clouds above us. For one suspended heartbeat the light caught his face. Sharp cheekbones. A scar cutting through one brow. Eyes like molten silver locking on mine. Something ancient and wild howled between us. Mate. I felt it like a collision. A tether snapping tight between my chest and his. My Omega went soft and wild at once, torn between terror and the terrifying urge to crawl closer, rest my head against his knee, beg him not to leave. He went very, very still. Captain, he said slowly. What is the penalty for interfering with a royal claiming? The captain blinked. My king, there is no penalty. It's your right. But she's unregistered, unknown blood. Then register her. The Alpha King snapped, power cracking through the rain. Effective immediately. Under my name. A stunned silence fell over the square. Someone hissed. Someone else crossed themselves against the moon. No Alpha, not even a king, claimed an Omega without council vetting, lineage records, sent trials. The law protected royal lines. Protected the kingdom from spies, half-bloods, and enemies. He had just ignored all of it. For me. The captain swallowed. Sire, the council will remember who is king, Kale growled. His wolf bled through that single word. She rides with us. Strong hands yanked me to my feet. Before I could understand, I was lifted onto the massive horse, settled in front of him. His arm came around my waist, iron and heat and scent, pine smoke, winter steel, something dark and aching. Breathe, He murmured against my hair so quietly no one else could hear. I am not going to hurt you, little Omega. The bond hummed in answer. My heart didn't believe my fear anymore. It believed him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The ride to Stormbane's citadel felt like fleeing the only life I'd ever known and racing straight into a story I had no ending for. Rain turned to snow as we climbed into the mountains. The fortress rose from the rock, black stone, silver banners, towers crowned with howling wolf statues. Down, Kale said when we passed through the iron gates. Soldiers helped me dismount, though my legs trembled too hard to stand. The Omega in me keened at the sudden loss of his touch. He noticed. Of course he did. Bring her to the east wing, he ordered. Omega quarters. No chains. No collar. The steward, a narrow-eyed male, flinched. My king, per law, an unknown Omega brought in by force, is under my protection, Kale cut in. Is that unclear? The corridor went silent. The Alpha King's word was the law, but even I knew he was stretching it, shredding it, for a girl he'd met an hour ago in the rain. Why? Because the moon had tied our souls without asking. Because the mate bond didn't care about politics, or borders, or ancient wars. They led me to a chamber overlooking the frozen courtyard. A fire already burned there. Furs piled on a bed big enough for 3 wolves. A tray weighted with warm stew and honey bread. I stood shivering in the center of the room, half expecting iron cuffs to appear. Instead, Kale himself entered and closed the door behind him. No guards. Just us. He removed his gloves slowly, watching me like I might bolt. Ashlyn. My name in his voice was rough, reverent. Do you understand what happened tonight? I understand you broke your own law for an Omega you don't know, I whispered. You shouldn't have. He stepped closer, silver eyes burning. I didn't have a choice. You're my fated mate. The words knocked the breath from my lungs. I'd heard the stories, the rare bond the moon goddess forged herself. Alpha and Omega made for each other's soul. Some packs killed for it. Some killed because of it. My mate? I echoed, shaking. There must be a mistake. I'm no one. I'm. His hand lifted, halted inches from my cheek, as if he was afraid to touch without permission. You are Omega, he said softly. Your scent matches mine like lock and key. When I smelled you in that tavern, every instinct I have, king, wolf, male, went for you. My throat tightened. Claiming me without records is illegal. Your own council will turn on you. Let them try, Kale said. I have waded through worse than their snarling. I will not hand you to cages or collars. If the goddess chose you, that is enough. He should have sounded arrogant. Instead, there was a strange, raw honesty under every word. I don't even know you, I whispered. Then we'll fix that. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. Eat. Sleep. No one touches you without my permission. That is my first law as your alpha. I should have rebelled, shouted that I belonged to no one. But the warmth in his eyes wasn't ownership, it was protection. For a girl who'd grown up being told she was too strange, too quiet, too much trouble, the promise almost hurt. Good night, Ashlyn, the Alpha King murmured, stepping back. You are safe here. He left before I could tell him that safety had never felt so terrifying. The next morning, the kingdom woke to scandal. I heard it whispered by maids changing the linens, by guards outside my door. The Alpha King brought home an Omega he found in a border tavern. Unmarked, unvetted, common. He invoked fated mate law without a council seal. He can't, someone hissed. What if she's spy-bred? What if she's enemy stock? The old world. Quiet, you want your tongue cut? I curled tighter on the bed, hugging my knees. Enemy stock. Spy-bred. Words I'd heard all my life without knowing why they hurt so sharply. Aunt Mara used to flinch when people asked where I'd been born. Found at the forest edge, she'd say. A storm gift. By midday, Kale summoned me. The throne room loomed in black and silver, filled with nobles, betas, advisors. He sat on the obsidian throne, a dark crown on his dark hair, eyes cold enough to freeze rivers. This was the Alpha King they feared. Not the man who'd spoken softly in my room. "Ashlyn," he said. "Come here." My legs shook, but I walked the long strip of stone. Whispers chased me. "Omega. No house sigil. Smells wrong." Kale rose. The court gasped. Alpha Kings did not rise for anyone. He descended the steps, stopping close enough that his scent wrapped around me, steadying my wolf. "This Omega is under my direct protection," he announced, voice like thunder. "By the will of the moon, she is my chosen mate. Any who challenge her challenges me. The council objects," an elder said, "brave or foolish. Our laws forbid bonding royal blood to improve in lineage. She could be Blackman born. She could be enemy," Kale supplied flatly. "Yes. The war with Black Moon took too many. I remember." For a moment something haunted flickered in his eyes. "But I will not punish an Omega for blood she did not choose." I swallowed. My heart hammered. She could be Blackman born. The words curled cold through my gut. I remembered flashes, all I had of before Aunt Mara. Red banners. A lullaby in a language no one in Nightfern spoke. A howl cut short. "I will submit to any test," I said quickly before fear stole my voice. "To prove I'm no threat to my Alpha King." Gasps. An Omega speaking in court at all was unheard of. Kale's gaze snapped to me, silver bright with something like pride. "You hear her," he said. "My Omega stands unafraid before your judgment while you cower behind old ghosts. Run your tests if it calms your restless minds. But my decision stands." He reached out, not for show, not hesitation, and brushed his fingers over the bare skin of my wrist where my hidden crescent mark lay. Sparks shot up my arm. The bond sang. "Touch her," Kale growled to the room, "and I will raise your bloodlines to ash." No one spoke again. The next weeks felt like living inside a tension bowstring. They did test me. Blood drawn. Scent recorded. Old crones with cloudy eyes and muttered prayers tracing the faint crescent birthmark on my wrist. Through it all, Kale kept his word. No chains, no collars, no hands on me but gentle ones. He did not rush me. That surprised me most. An Alpha King with a fated Omega could have invoked the right to mark me at once. Instead he visited in the evenings like some uncertain suitor, always leaving space between us, always asking. "Tell me about Nightfern," he'd say, leaning against the window while snow drifted outside. "Small," I'd answer. "Loud. They thought I was strange." "Because you're quiet?" "Because I didn't belong." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You belong here." He showed me the training yards, the rookery, the library. He introduced me to his beta, Rowan, who watched me with wary respect, and his healer, Elira, who sniffed me 3 times before grunting. "Omega, yes. Scared, yes. Spy, no." The bond between us grew roots, soft, stubborn things. I learned Kale's rage was legend, but his temper was mostly wielded to protect, not destroy. I saw him stop a noble from striking a servant. I watched him choose mercy for a thief who'd stolen medicine for his pup. "This kingdom needs a monster," he told me once on the ramparts, cloak whipping in the wind. "So I let them call me one. It keeps their enemies afraid." "And who keeps you from becoming the monster they fear?" I asked. His gaze slid to me, eyes gentling. "You do, Omega." The results came back on a storm-heavy night. We were in his private study, the fire painting gold on his sharp features as he read a dispatch. I was curled in a chair with a book Elira had insisted I take, trying not to hum with awareness of how close he sat. A knock. Rowan entered, snow in his hair, a sealed tube in his hand. His eyes flicked toward me, then to Kale. "It's about her," he said. My stomach dropped. Kale broke the seal, scanned the parchment. For a heartbeat the world held its breath. His hand tightened. The page crinkled. "Out," he told Rowan, voice clipped. My king! Out. The door shut. Silence. The fire popped. I rose on unsteady legs. Cale? He looked up at me, a war waging in his gaze. Pain. Fury. Something like resignation. Your blood, he said hoarsely. They traced it. I wrapped my arms around myself. And you are pure-blooded alpha line, he said. On your mother's side. On your father's. His jaw locked. Ashlyn, your sire was Alpha Reagan of Black Moon. The enemy he had killed. The king whose crest mothers used to frighten their pups. My lungs forgot how to work. That's not possible. He slaughtered Blackman's line. Everyone says. I killed Reagan, Cale said quietly. On the battlefield. He had no heir. We believed. His gaze raked over my face like he was seeing a ghost. You are his daughter. An Omega born of my enemy's blood. For a long, awful second, either of us moved. Pieces slid into place inside my mind with cruel clarity. The strange lullaby. The red banners in my earliest memory. Aunt Mara's panic whenever Stormbane riders passed our village. The way villagers spat when they spoke Blackman's name, and looked at me. I staggered back. So I'm the monster pup they whispered about. I whispered. Spy-bred Omega. Enemy stock. Your laws say I should be dead. Cale's wolf surged behind his eyes. My laws, he said slowly, were written before I knew the moon would tie my soul to Reagan's child. He could have turned cold. Could have summoned guards. Instead he crossed the space between us in 3 strides, not touching, just close enough that his alpha aura steadied my shaking. Look at me, Ashlyn. Look at me. I dragged my gaze up. His was raw. Open. You are not your father's sins, he said. You are my Omega. The only thing in years that has made me believe I'm more than a weapon. If the council thinks I'll cast you aside because of old blood feuds, they've forgotten who I am. You broke laws to claim me. I choked. They'll say you did it knowing. That you meant to chain Black Moon through me. Then we changed the laws, Cale said. I am the Alpha King. I will not lose my mate to ghosts. A tear slipped down my cheek. He caught himself before wiping it away, hand hovering. May I? He asked. The simplest word in the world. Permission. No one had ever asked to touch me before. Yes, I whispered. His thumb brushed my cheek with breathtaking gentleness. Good, he murmured. Then we fight this. Together. Together, turned out to mean standing side by side while the High Council tried to tear us apart. They gathered in the obsidian hall, 12 elders cloaked in gray, smelling of incense and old fear. At their head, Councillor Varric, whose family had lost sons in the Black Moon War. His gaze on me was pure venom. This cannot stand, Varric declared. Alpha King or not, you may not bind our throne to Black Moon blood. The war oaths demand her execution. My knees wobbled. Cale's fingers brushed mine, the smallest grounding touch. The war oaths demand justice, Cale answered. Not slaughter of innocents. The moon marked her Omega. She is under my protection. She is Reagan's whelp. She is my mate. Cale snarled, power cracking through the air hard enough to rattle banners. Wolves in the shadows whined and bowed instinctively. Even my Omega dropped her gaze, heart racing. Varric bared his teeth. If you cling to her, you break the oaths. Packs will rebel. Then let them, Cale said. I will face every alpha in open challenge before I let you put a blade to her throat. His vow lit something fierce and aching in my chest. No one had ever chosen me first. Not Aunt Mara. Not the villagers. Certainly not the nameless man whose blood ran in my veins. I will stand before any pack, I said quietly, surprising them all. Let them see I am no weapon. Just an Omega who didn't ask to be born from the wrong alpha. Whispers. Shock. Cale's head turned, eyes burning with a mixture of frustration and admiration. "Ashlyn," he murmured, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do," I said, meeting his gaze. "If I am truly your queen, let me help carry this." They scheduled the conclave within the week. Every major alpha was summoned to Stormbane, drawn by the promise of scandal and blood. Cale trained harder. I watched from the gallery as he fought 3 warriors at once, sweat gleaming on hard muscle, wolf just under his skin. Each time he disarmed an opponent, his gaze slid up to where I sat, as if making sure I was still there. As if every swing of his blade was for me. At night, he came to my chambers less like a king and more like a man afraid the world would steal something vital. We talked until the fire died, about his first shift, about the night he killed Reagan and saw too late the terror in the other alpha's eyes. "I thought I was saving us," he admitted, staring into the embers. "I didn't know there was a pup hidden in the burning keep. If I had," he swallowed. "If I had, I would have carried you out myself." I believed him. I shouldn't have. But the bond hummed truth between us. One snow-silent midnight, I woke from a nightmare of flames and howls to find him sitting by my bed, boots still on, crown abandoned on the table. "Storms in your head too?" he asked softly. "Yes," I whispered. He hesitated. "I won't touch you unless you ask." "But—" "I could stay. Until you fall asleep." My Omega, traitor to my every defense, leaned toward him. "Stay," I breathed. He stretched out on top of the covers, leaving space between us, large hand resting palm up where I could reach it. I slid my fingers into his. For the first time since the truth of my blood, sleep came easy. The day of the conclave dawned bright and bitter. The kind of cold that cracked stone and made breath smoke like ghosts. Alphas and betas filled the great hall, each in their colors. Some I recognized from stories. Alpha Lysandra of the eastern glades, fierce and golden-eyed. Alpha Taurin of the iron claws, scars on his throat. A dozen others who had lost kin in the Black Moon War. I stood at Cale's right, in a simple silver gown Alira had sewn, crescent birthmark bare on my wrist. My heart tried to escape my ribs. The scent of hostile wolves pressed down like a storm. Cale's hand brushed the small of my back, subtle, grounding. "Remember," he murmured for my ears alone. "You are mine. They cannot unmake what the moon has done." Varric spoke first, painting pictures of burned villages, of pups slaughtered by Reagan's forces. Each word drove the knife of guilt deeper, even though those sins weren't mine. Then he turned, pointing at me. "And now his spawn stands beside our king. If he binds to her, Black Moon lives in our blood. Will you tolerate this, Alphas?" Growls. Shouts. Rage surged like a tide. "Enough," Cale said, stepping forward. Power rolled from him, silencing the room. "You want truth? You'll have it. Reagan's line lives whether you kill this Omega or not. Blood doesn't vanish because you spill more of it." He took my hand in his and lifted it, displaying the crescent mark. "The moon marked her as mine. If you demand I reject my fated Omega to soothe your pride, then you are no better than the tyrant you claim to hate." Lysandra rose, Fox's bright eyes narrowed. "Is she truly his?" she asked, gaze flicking from Cale to me. "Or a convenient excuse to fold Blackmoon's remnants into your rule?" Heat licked my cheeks. "I didn't know," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I grew up scrubbing tavern floors and night fern. I thought I was nothing. I still feel like nothing until—" I glanced at Cale, found courage in the way he looked at me like I was everything. Until he chose to see me. A murmur rippled through the hall. "I am Omega," I continued. "I am Blackmoon's daughter by blood, Stormbane's by bond. Killing me won't change the past. Let me be a bridge instead of another corpse on your altar." The words surprised even me. They came from somewhere deep, where the mate bond and my own stubborn hope twined together. Taurin snorted. "Pretty speech. But bridges can be burned." "Try," Cale said calmly, "and I will end any alpha who lifts Fang against her. This is not a negotiation. This is notification." I break the old oaths today. No more children killed for the mistakes of their sires. No more Omegas caged for where they came from. Hate me for it. Fear me for it. But understand this, I will not spill my mate's blood to keep your comfort. Something shifted in the room. Some eyes narrowed in fury. Others considered. Lysandra sat slowly. You always were a stubborn bastard, she said. But I've buried enough sons for one lifetime. I'll not demand another death. One by one, more alphas chose silence over rebellion. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't execution. For now we'd won. Victory came with a price. Rumors spread like wildfire. The Alpha King has turned traitor to his own oaths. The Omega Queen carries enemy blood. Some packs pulled their scouts from our borders. Trade caravans faltered. In the shadows, something uglier stirred. 3 nights after the conclave, I woke to the scent of unfamiliar wolves. Rough hands clamped over my mouth. My scream died as they dragged me from the bed, out the balcony, down a rope. Kale! I tried to shout, but the word came out as a muffled sob. Move! A voice hissed. For your father's honor, girl. Black hoods. Black moon sigils I'd only seen in old sketches. They hauled me onto a waiting horse and rode hard into the forest. In Stormbane Citadel, Kale woke to cold sheets and the shredded remains of the rope on my balcony. His roar shook the mountain. Rowan burst into his chamber. They've taken her. Who? Black Moon Loyalists. Rowan's jaw clenched. They left a mark on the stone. The symbol seared into the railing was unmistakable, a black crescent over a bleeding moon. Kale's wolf lunged. Saddle my horse? His voice was ruin soft and deadly. We ride now. My king, if you leave unguarded. I am not a crown tonight, Kale snarled. I am an alpha whose omega was stolen. Anyone who stands between me and her dies. I expected torture. Accusations. Fury for daring to stand beside the wolf who'd killed their alpha. Instead, when they yanked the hood from my head in a torchlit cave, an older woman with Reagan's eyes stepped forward and cupped my face with shaking hands. Goddess, she whispered. You have her eyes. My brother's eyes. Your Ira Black Moon, she said. Your aunt. Shock rolled through me. You kidnapped me. We rescued you, snarled a male in tattered black armor. Stormbane stole you, used you as shield. I wasn't a shield, I snapped, surprising us both. Kale didn't know whose child I was until your own sigils bled out of my blood. He broke laws to keep me safe before that. Ira studied me closely. Does he treat you as Omega, or as ransom? Images flashed. His hand offered palm up in the dark, his refusal to mark me without consent, his voice breaking when he swore he'd face every alpha for me. As his, I said simply. Not as leverage. Murmurs. Disbelief. You should hate him. The armored male spit. He killed your father. I hate war, I said. I hate men who believe pups deserve to die for crowns. Kale is changing that. You stole me to resurrect a ghost. I won't let you turn me into a weapon against my mate. Ira's gaze sharpened at that word. Your mate. Yes, I answered. My Alpha King. Mine by the moon's choice, and by my own. Outside, a howl split the night. Raw. Furious. Familiar. Kale. Wolves in black moon armor tensed. The armored male cursed. He tracked us. Of course he did, I whispered, my omega surging toward that sound. The bond thrummed like a live wire, screaming distance, direction, pain. Ira's mouth thinned. If he dies here, the packs tear each other apart. If you stay with him, my brother's line becomes storm-chained. I am so tired, I said quietly, of men using my blood to measure kingdoms. I stepped away from them, toward the cave mouth. He is not perfect. But he is trying to be better than the king who spilled my father's blood. That's more than I can say for any of you, hiding in holes and stealing girls from their beds. The armored male lunged to grab me. Ira's growl stopped him. Let her go, she snapped. If the moon tied her to Stormbane's alpha, she is our best hope of surviving this madness, not our blade. Our eyes met. For the first time, I saw not a kidnapper, but a woman who had also lost too much to war. Go, she said, before he brings the mountain down. The clearing outside the cave boiled with wolves when I emerged. Stormbane's silver clashed with black moon black, snow kicked up in bloody arcs. In the center, massive and feral, Kale's wolf tore through an attacker, fur bristling, eyes wild. Kale! I shouted. His head snapped toward me. For a heartbeat, he didn't see anything but target and threat. Then his gaze focused. Recognition slammed into the bond. He was at my side in 3 strides, shifting mid-run, bones snapping, for retreating until my Alpha King knelt naked and shaking in the snow, hands hovering like he was afraid I'd vanish if he touched me. Ashlyn, he rasped. Did they hurt you? No. My throat burned. You came. I will always come, he said, as if it were the simplest truth. I thought I'd lost you. Behind us, Ira stepped forward, hands raised. Stand down, she shouted to the Black Moon wolves. This war ends tonight. Silence rippled outward. This is Reagan's daughter, she called. Fated by the moon to the Alpha King who killed him. You can see curse or you can see chance. I am done burying kin for dead men's grudges. Her words hung brittle in the freezing air. Kale didn't look away from me. You choose, he said softly. Tell me to walk away from them or offer them my hand, and I will. The kingdom dangled on the edge of my answer. I remembered the conclave. The snarling elders. The terrified servants. The law that had demanded my death the second they learned my name. I remembered Kale's promise, no more children killed for their sires. I won't be a weapon, I said. Not for them. Not against them. I took a breath that seemed to scrape my lungs clean. If they lay down claws, if they swear to your reforms, no more slaughter for bloodlines, then I want peace. Kale's jaw tightened. He was a war king. Battle was carved into his bones. Choosing peace cost him something real. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Then peace is what we offer, he called to the watching wolves. Black Moon stands if it stands under the same law, no pup blamed for their father's sins. Harm my Omega, and I raise you. Stand beside us, and you'll have a place in the new order. Murmurs. Doubt. Hope. Ira lowered her head. Black Moon accepts, she said. For her sake. For all the lost. It wasn't a perfect treaty. It was fragile as spring ice. But it was a start. Kale finally pulled me into his arms, tucking my head under his chin. His entire body shook. Don't run from me again, he muttered. You're the one who leaves windows climbable. I sniffled. A startled huff of laughter escaped him. Goddess, I love you. The words spilled out raw, unplanned, truer than any oath. My heart answered before my head could catch up. I love you too, Alpha, I whispered. Even when you're infuriating. The coronation of an Omega Queen born from both enemy and king should have been a bloodbath. Instead, it became the strangest, softest miracle this shattered kingdom had ever seen. A year later, Stormbane's great hall gleamed with candlelight. Banners of silver and black twined together, Stormbane's crest beside a new sigil, a crescent moon half-shadowed, half-lit. I stood at Kale's side, crown light on my hair, his mark resting warm on the curve of my neck where he'd finally, reverently claimed me on a night thick with whispered consent and tangled hearts. No one had forced me. That mattered more than any law. In the crowd, I caught Ira's gaze. She inclined her head, grief and pride mingled. On the balcony above, pups from Stormbane and Black Moon chased each other, no one caring whose crest they wore. Kale's hand sought mine, fingers threading like they'd been made for it. Nervous, Omega? He murmured. Only a little, my Alpha King. I glanced at him. You sure you want Reagan's daughter on your throne? His answer was to lift our joined hands, addressing the court. "This is your queen," he said. "Born of the Alpha I once hated, chosen by the moon I serve, claimed by the king who would burn down every law before he'd break her spirit. Remember this day. The old ways died so we could live." The roar that followed wasn't all joy. Some held doubt, some anger. But beneath it all, something new pulsed, possibility. Later, when the hall emptied and the crowns lay on the table, Kale pressed his forehead to mine. "Did I give you a heart full of fairy tales, little Omega?" "No," I said, smiling. "You gave me something better." "What's that?" "A kingdom where an Omega born on the wrong side of a war is loved on purpose," I whispered. "And a story my viewers will beg to hear again." Outside, the moon climbed high, bright over a land slowly learning that alpha strength meant nothing without the courage to choose mercy. And in the quiet between our heartbeats, the bond hummed a promise. This was only the beginning. Peace didn't feel like trumpets and banners. It felt like suspicion in the hallways and ink-stained fingers over new laws. Weeks after the treaty, I sat curled in Kale's study, copying revisions in my neater script while he paced. "Read it again," he said. I did. "By decree of Alpha King Kale Stormbane and Omega Queen Ashlyn Blackmoon Stormbane, no pup, Omega, or wolf shall be punished for bloodline alone. Crimes are acts, not ancestry." He slowed. "You like it?" "I like that future Omegas won't be hunted because they smell like the wrong history," I said. A rare, soft smile ghosted his mouth. "Then it stays." Rowan slipped in, shutting the door behind him. "We've intercepted letters," he said. "Some nobles are gathering support to correct your error regarding the Omega Queen." His eyes flicked apologetically to me. "They talk of forcing a proper match." Kale's wolf slammed through the room. "Over my dead body," he snarled. "Over theirs," I muttered before I could stop myself. Both men blinked, then Kale huffed a hoarse laugh. "That's my Omega," he said, pride warming the words like sunlight. "We'll show them what happens when they threaten what the Alpha King chose with his whole soul." The threats didn't stay ink on parchment. It happened during a winter feast meant to show unity. Stormbane and Black Moon banners hung side by side while I sat at Kale's right, wearing a crown that still felt too heavy and his scent that felt exactly right. An elder lord lifted a goblet. "To the Alpha King," he toasted. "May he rule with wisdom." Another added, "And may the Omega Queen bring him worthy heirs." A strange note threaded that last word. Kale's hand brushed my knee under the table, steady. I lifted my cup to my lips. The scent hit me an instant too late, sharp, bitter, wrong. My stomach clenched. The room tilted. Poison. The goblet slipped from my fingers, wine dark as blood spilling across the table. Kale was on his feet before it hit wood. "Ashlyn." His voice shredded. He caught me as my knees buckled, one arm around my waist, the other shoving the goblet away. He sniffed at once, face going cold. "Rowan." "Already," Rowan snapped, grabbing the cup, barking orders. My heart hammered. My lungs burned. But my wolf surged, furious. "I'm fine," I forced out. "Didn't drink." He looked into my eyes, really looked, alpha power sweeping over me like a diagnostic storm. Relief shuddered through him. "Who poured that?" he asked, too calm. The hall went dead silent. Kale straightened with me still in his arms like he'd forgotten I wasn't weightless. "Someone in this hall just tried to kill my Omega Queen," he said, voice soft as snow and twice as deadly. "No one leaves until I find out who believes their life worth that mistake." He didn't roar. He didn't rave. That quiet was worse. And as every gaze darted, every throat swallowed, I realized something. They feared their Alpha King. But now, they were beginning to fear for their Omega too. Elira confirmed it in her workroom later, swirling the last crimson traces at the cup's bottom. "Fast acting," she said. "Would have stopped her heart if she'd taken a proper sip." Kale stood like carved ice, fists clenched. I sat on the table, swinging my bare feet just to prove I could. "I smelled it," I said. The second it touched my lips. Omega instincts are good for something. I should never have let that cup near you, Kale growled. I nudged his arm. Alpha, you also can't personally smell every drink in the kingdom. I can start, he muttered. Then they win, I said softly. If they turn you into a paranoid warden instead of a king trying to change things. His eyes snapped to mine. They don't get to almost kill you. Then make it cost them, I said. Publicly. Not just for me. Make it clear that attacking the Omega Queen is attacking the new law itself. A slow, wicked light entered his gaze. You want to show little Omega? I want them scared of hurting any Omega ever again, I replied. Using me as a reminder works. He stepped closer, bracing his hands on the table on either side of my hips, caging me in with his heat. Sometimes, he murmured, I forget you were raised outside these walls. You're more wolf than half my council. And you're more heart than your legend. I shot back. My pulse jumped annoyingly fast when his smile turned tender. For you, he said quietly. Only for you. The culprit turned out not to be some shadowed assassin, but a trembling young lordling with his father's words in his ears and a vial in his sleeve. I didn't want to, he sobbed before the assembled court. But my father said if we let Black Moon blood sit the throne, the goddess would curse us. Kale didn't unsheath his claws. He didn't have to. The entire hall felt his fury. You listened to fear over sense, the Alpha King said, and tried to murder the Omega the moon herself marked for me. I watched the boy, barely older than I had been scrubbing tavern floors, eyes swollen with regret. Execution, hissed Varric from the side, hungry. Prove to them what treason earns. Old ways, answer blood with blood. My wolf shivered. My heart rebelled. Let me speak, I said. Kale glanced at me, surprise flickering, then nodded once. I stepped toward the kneeling boy. Look at me. He did, flinching. You tried to kill me because you were afraid of a story, I said. The story that my blood is a curse. You were wrong. But if we kill you now, we teach the packs that death is still the only answer to fear. Murmurs. Kale's aura pressed against mine, checking. Are you sure? Yes, I whispered through the bond neither of us fully knew how to use but both felt. Aloud I said, strip him of title. Make him work in the healer's wing, where he sees every day what poison does. Let him live as proof that this court is not ruled by fear anymore. Varric spat. Softness. Mercy chosen from strength. Kale snapped, cutting him off. Is not softness. It is command. He pronounced the sentence as I'd suggested. Some called it weakness. But I saw the way the servants looked at me differently that day. Less like a target. More like a shield. Spring crept up the mountains, slow and stubborn. With it came something I hadn't expected, quiet moments. Mornings where Kale brought me tea in his bare feet, crown forgotten, hair still a mess from sleep. Afternoons where I watched pups from both banners train together, falling into laughing piles of fur. Nights where I read aloud drafts of the new code while his head rested in my lap and he pretended he wasn't listening that intently. You know, I said one evening, tracing circles on his broad shoulder. You're very bad at being a monster. He huffed against my thigh. Don't tell the council. It ruins my image. My Alpha King, feared for miles, secretly likes Omega fingers in his hair. I teased. He caught my wrist, kissing my pulse. Only one Omega, he corrected. His eyes lifted, molten silver locking on mine. Always only you. Warmth bloomed under my skin, soft and overwhelming. The bond purred. These were the moments that would hook my listeners. Not just war and poison and prophecy, but the image of the cold Alpha King undone by choosing love loudly, stubbornly, over the easy safety of old hate. This still feels like a story, I murmured. It is, he said. When we get to keep writing. Of course, stories don't end because we want a quiet chapter. They twist. I woke one dawn with a strange flutter low in my belly and the unmistakable scent shift of my own body changing. Elira sniffed once, then grinned so hard it nearly cracked her face. "Well," she said, "looks like the moon decided to bless your rebellion." "What?" I croaked. "Pups, Omega," she laughed. "Plural, if my nose is right." The world narrowed. I sat slowly. "But I was told Omegas like me, mixed blood, stress-raised, might never." "Old lies," Elira scoffed. "Bodies are stubborn miracles. Now we tell your Alpha before he faints from sniffing it himself." Kale did not faint. He froze when the news hit, eyes blown wide, then crushed me into his chest so carefully it made my throat sting. "Are you happy?" I asked into his tunic, sudden fear sparking. "With my blood in them too?" He leaned back, took my face in his hands. "Ashlyn, I would have chosen you even if we never had pups. That we do is the goddess spoiling me beyond reason." He knelt then, Alpha King on stone, pressing his forehead to my still flat belly. "Little wolves," he murmured. "You are wanted. You are not weapons. You are proof that something good grew from all this ruin." If I'd been telling this to my viewers, that's the moment I'd slow down. Let the words sit. Let them feel the lethal Alpha King whisper promises to unborn pups like prayers. The realm's reaction, of course, was less soft. News of the Omega Queen's pregnancy tore through the packs. Some howled in celebration. Others sharpened knives. Black moon blood in the airs. Varric spat in council. "You doom us." "I save us," Kale replied. "Half your pure alphas are rotting from the inside with old grudges. My children will be born from war and peace both. They'll know better. They'll be targets," Rowan said quietly later, "just with us. We need tighter security." "You'll teach them to fight," Kale said. "I will teach them to lead. Ashlyn will teach them to choose mercy without flinching. Anyone who comes for them will learn what happens when Alpha, Omega, and heirs stand as one." I listened, palm resting unconsciously over the life inside me, and felt something fierce and protective rise. Not just for our pups, but for every Omega who might one day exist under laws kinder than mine. "If this story keeps one girl from a collar," I said, "then every risk is worth it." Kale looked at me like he'd never loved anything so much, and so helplessly. "You keep talking like that," he murmured, "and they'll call you more dangerous than their Alpha King." "Good," I said. Danger, when it came, didn't march in armor. It slipped through cracks. A whisper here. A bribe there. By the time we realized some border packs were ignoring our reforms, still selling unclaimed Omegas to distant courts, it burned. "They use our crest," Rowan snarled, slamming down a report. "Call themselves loyal to Stormbane while caging Omegas." Kale's eyes went winter-hard. "No more. Let me speak," I said. Both men turned. "They won't listen to you," Rowan said. "They barely tolerate." "They don't have to like me," I said. "They just have to hear me with you beside me." So we rode. Alpha King and pregnant Omega Queen, cloaked against the chill, crest flying high. Our arrival in Ironfen Pack's courtyard sent wolves scrambling. Their Alpha came out smirking. "Your Majesties," he said. "To what do we owe?" "To the cages under your hall," Kale cut in. "Open them." The Alpha bristled. "Our Omegas are secure until we choose mates for them." "Collared," I said. "Chained. Sold." "That's not security. This is our way." "Not anymore," Kale said, stepping forward. "I broke my own laws to protect one Omega. Did you think I'd leave the rest to rot?" I stepped past Kale before claws came out. The Ironfen Alpha's gaze flicked to my belly, then to my mark. Calculation sharpened his eyes. "You would threaten me while carrying heirs?" He scoffed. "No," I said softly. "I would remind you that I am still Omega, and I remember what it's like to be afraid, and hungry, and told your property." I motioned, and Kale signaled. Guards dragged one of the Ironfen cages out, A narrow iron crate small enough to break bones. The Omega inside shrank from the torchlight, collar biting her neck. How many stories do you think she'll tell your pups about you? I asked, voice shaking not with fear but anger. About being chained by her own alpha. The courtyard hushed. Kale's power surged at my back like a promise. You get one choice, he told Ironfen. Swear to the new law and free them, or stand against your king and their queen. The Alpha hesitated. Looked at the Omega. Looked at Kale's eyes. Looked at the archers on the wall, some of whom suddenly weren't sure of whose side they'd pick. He knelt. Ironfen submits. He ground out. We'll free them. Chains fell. Omegas stepped blinking into the cold air. One met my gaze. I saw gratitude there, and disbelief. Another seed planted. Another chapter my viewers would cling to. We returned home exhausted but alive, with freed Omegas riding in our caravan. That night, as I soaked sore feet, Kale knelt behind me and rested his chin on my shoulder. You shouldn't have stood so close to that Alpha, he murmured. He looked at you like a threat. I am, I said, leaning back against his chest. A heartwarming one. He laughed quietly. You're going to turn my kingdom upside down. Already did. I yawned. You helped. His hands slid to my belly, protective. Rest, Omega. Let me carry the worry tonight. I closed my eyes, listening to the double rhythm under my own, my heart, our pups, his steady breath. If I were narrating, this is where I'd soften my tone, promising my listeners that even in a world of claws and crowns, there are nights like this. Nights where the Alpha King is just a man holding the Omega he nearly lost, and the future feels possible. But every good story keeps one last twist. Labor came early. Too early. I woke to pain carving fire down my spine. Alira's face loomed above me. We're ready, she said. They're early, but strong. Trust your body, Omega. Kale paced like a caged wolf until I swore I'd throw something at him if he didn't come hold my hand. When he did, his grip was careful, calloused, shaking. You've fought wars, I hissed between contractions. Why do you look like you're dying? Because I can't punch this, he said hoarsely. I can only watch you hurt. I grabbed his collar and dragged him close. Then don't watch, I growled. Do this with me. And he did. Every breath, every curse, every whispered promise. Hours later, two small, furious cries split the air. Alira laughed, tears on her cheeks. Twins, she announced. One boy, one girl. Strong lungs. Kale stared like he'd never seen anything so holy. When she placed them in my arms, my heart broke wider than any battle wound. Hello, little storms, I whispered. Welcome to the mess we made for you. Kale touched his son's tiny fist, his daughter's dark curl. I swear, he said, voice rough. No law, no ghost, no council will ever touch you. You are ours. That's all that matters. If anyone ever doubted whether the Alpha King could love, they'd never seen him then. The kingdom, predictably, had opinions. Some rejoiced. Some spat. Varric quietly resigned and vanished to some distant holding, muttering that history would prove him right. History, I decided, would prove us louder. We named our daughter Lyra, for the constellations Ira once traced in smoky cave ceilings to calm crying pups. We named our son Kalen, for reasons obvious and selfish. Their howls echoed down palace corridors before they could even crawl, much to Rowan's mock horror. Too many alphas, he grumbled as Kalen gnawed his thumb. And a princess who bites. She's Omega, I corrected, watching Lyra gum her uncle's knuckle with ferocity. Titles don't decide teeth. At night, Kale and I took turns telling them stories. Not of perfect princes, but of broken kings who learned better. Of Omegas who changed the world without claws. Of a moon who tied enemy and king together on purpose. Isn't that too honest this early? Rowan asked once. Let them grow up knowing the truth, I said. So no one can weaponize lies against them. Kale brushed a curl from Lyra's forehead. Our pups will not build their throne on fairy tales, he agreed. They'll build it on choices. Years slid by in chapters, each with their own hooks. Lyra sneaked into council at 5, demanding to know why no Omegas sat at the table. The next month, they did. Kalen disappeared into the training yards, learning from Rowan without ever being told he had to be a monster to be strong. The first time he stopped a spar to help his opponent up, Rowan muttered something about too much of his mother, and I considered that a victory. Black Moon refugees trickled out of shadows, drawn by Ira's letters and our leniency. Some knelt. Some didn't. Kale didn't force them. That, too, was new. We had setbacks. A border riot. A near assassination where Lyra bit an attacker hard enough to flinch him before Kale tore him from her. My heart stopped that day. It still restarts sometimes in the middle of the night. But every time the old hatred tried to rise, we answered it with something stubborn, us. Alpha King and Omega Queen who refused to break apart. He broke old laws, I broke old fears. Together, somehow, we kept choosing each other in front of everyone. And my viewers, if they could see this, would keep coming back for that choice. On the 10th anniversary of our coronation, the moon hung huge above the citadel, silvering the courtyards where Stormbane and Black Moon banners no longer hung separate but braided. A festival roared outside. Music. Laughter. Wolves shifting for the joy of running, not for war. I slipped away to the balcony for a breath. Kale followed, as he always did, as if pulled by an invisible string. Thinking? He asked, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind, chin settling on my shoulder. Always, I said. About the girl in the tavern. About the Alpha King in the rain. About how one broken law shattered 100 older chains. His grip tightened. I'd break them all again, he murmured. Every law. Every oath. Every expectation. If it meant finding you in that smoke and pine once more. You already did, I teased. It worked. He turned me to face him, eyes softened from lethal silver to something ridiculous and fond. Ashlyn, he said quietly. You know there is no story where I don't choose you, right? Yes, I said. And that's why they stay. The listeners. The ones who find us. They don't come for perfect kings. They come for the Alpha who risks everything for his Omega, and doesn't regret it. Do you? He asked. There was still a hint of boy in that. It made my heart twist. Never, I said. Sometimes, late, when the fires burned low in the pups, no, not pups anymore, teens with too much energy, snored in tangled heaps, Kale asked me to tell the story again. From the start, he'd say, head in my lap. Indulge your Alpha. So I would. I'd talk about rain in Tavern Ash, about the first electric taste of the bond, about Law 13 and how casually he shattered it to drag me onto his horse. You were so arrogant, I'd say. You were so stubborn, he'd counter. We'd argue playfully over details, who spoke first, who looked away. The bones of it always stayed the same, Alpha King. Omega. Enemy's daughter. Laws broken. Futures rewritten. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd let them take me? I asked once. He went still. No, he said. Because any version of me that watched you dragged to cages is a version I've already killed. The bond hummed with the weight of that vow. That's dark, I said softly. That's honest, he replied. Our world was never gentle. You made it softer. But I won't pretend it started that way. And that, right there, is what keeps the story real. Not saccharine. Not easy. Just two people who stubbornly refused to let the world decide what they were allowed to be. When Lyra announced at 16 that she'd scented her fated mate in a visiting Omega healer, the court nearly choked. An Omega? With an Omega? Someone mumbled. I watched Kale carefully. Traditions tugged one way. Our history tugged another. He looked at our daughter, then at the healer girl with kind hands and steady eyes. Is she good to you? He asked. Yes, Lyra said fiercely. She sees me, not my crest. He nodded once. Then anyone who has a problem can find a new court. Later, Lyra threw herself at him. Thank you, Papa? Alpha King. War Breaker. Father who chose his Omega's path as template. Love overrules. Kalen, on the other hand, fell for a quiet beta scholar who challenged him on every policy draft. Kale only laughed. Good, he said. You'll need someone who tells you when you're being thick. Every choice our pups made echoed the one we'd carved, bonds for hearts, not flags. Years later, when our hair had more silver and the pups had their own, a young Omega from some distant pack stood in our hall, shaking as she told us how her father wanted to sell her. They say I'm cursed, she whispered, because I don't want the male they picked. Curse sounds familiar, I murmured, trading a look with Kale. Sounds like a wolf who needs somewhere safe, he agreed. We gave her a room. Gave her work in the library. Let her breathe. A month later, she came with ink on her fingers and fire in her eyes. Could I write my story? She asked. Oh, I smiled. You definitely should. She posted pages in markets. Whispered them in gatherings. Her tale spread, an Omega who ran, who chose, who found a life beyond the mate chosen for her. Other girls listened. Other alphas hesitated over collars. Look what you started. Kale mused one night, reading a copied chapter. What we started, I corrected. You broke the first law. I said the first no. Now they're doing the rest. On our 20th bond day, the packs held a moot not to debate our choices, but to celebrate them. Alpha stood in a circle lit by bonfires, raising cups not to war oaths, but to the peace edicts. Omegas and betas mingled freely instead of lurking behind them. Ira leaned heavily on a cane, hair gone white, eyes still sharp. You did well, Stormgirl, she said, squeezing my hand. Reagan would never have managed this. Too proud. I get my stubborn from somewhere, I said. From you, Kale murmured at my other side. Not from either of us old fools. Lyra and her Omega mate danced near the fire. Kalen argued amiably with Torin's daughter about trade terms, both grinning. If you had told me, Kale said quietly, watching it all, that breaking one law to claim one Omega would do all this, you'd have done it faster, I said. He laughed low. Yes. Sometimes stories fade when the danger is gone. Ours didn't. It grew into a legend told to pups who never saw the cages break, never smelled poison sting, never watched an alpha king kneel in the snow. They only knew that once, an alpha chose his Omega over his fear, and a kingdom followed. In the quiet of our chambers, older now, Kale touched my crescent mark and said, You know they don't believe I was ever as bad as I was. That's your own fault, I said. For ruining your scary reputation with all this growth. He bumped his forehead against mine. I still have claws. And I'm still your enemy's daughter, I reminded him. We've always been a scandal. The best one, he murmured. If I were recording this for your channel, this is where I'd lower my voice and tell them. Remember, it started with a law. It lasted because of a choice. On the last night of winter one year, snow falling slow and soft, Kale and I crept out to the walls like we had as children we'd never been. No crowns. No titles. Just Alpha and Omega, hand in hand. Do you regret anything? I asked. I regret not finding you sooner, he said without pause. I regret every night you spent thinking you were nothing. I regret the fear in your eyes when you thought my laws meant more to me than you. I leaned into him. I regret not drinking that poisoned wine, I joked weakly. Think of the chaos, he growled. Don't. I'm kidding. I tipped my face up. You know what I really regret? What? Nothing, I said. Because every jagged piece brought us right here. He kissed me then, slow and sure, the Alpha King and his Omega Queen under a quiet moon that had seen all our worst days and blessed us anyway. And if you're still listening, if your heart's still hooked on an Alpha who'd burn his throne for his Omega and an Omega who'd turn that throne into a promise, then you already know the point. You'll be back for the next one. Because stories like this don't really end. They just open the door for another alpha, another omega, another impossible choice. And that's where we start the next story. Years later, when time had softened the sharp edges of our story, Kale and I walked the moonlit cliffs where it had all begun, the same ridge where rain once fell between us like a wall. The world below was quiet, dotted with the fires of a peaceful kingdom. Our children ruled now. Lyra in the north, fierce and kind, her omega mate at her side. Kalen in the south, steady and wise, a king who preferred books over blades. They didn't need us anymore, not really. And that was the most beautiful ache of all. Kale's hand found mine. His grip was still strong, though silver threaded his dark hair. When they tell our story, he said, his voice low, what do you think they'll remember? Probably the drama, I teased. The law-breaking, the battles, the way you glared at everyone like they owed you their lungs. He laughed, soft and warm. And you? I hope they remember what came after, I said. How the Alpha King learned to listen. How the Omega he took as an enemy's daughter became his compass. How we built something gentle out of war. The wind carried our scent into the dark, Alpha and Omega, still bound, still choosing. Kale leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. If the goddess called me to live it all again, he murmured, I'd still break every law to find you. I smiled up at him, the moonlight catching the faint scars across his jaw, the same ones I'd once kissed after battle. And I'd still forgive you, I whispered. Because that's what started everything, not power, not prophecy. Just love. He pulled me close, and together we watched the first light of dawn spill over the peaks. The kingdom below stirred awake, free, whole, alive. And somewhere, in the soft hush between night and morning, I swore I heard the moon whisper her approval. Our story was never about a throne. It was about two souls who defied the world, and taught it how to heal. Thank you so much for listening to. The Alpha King broke every law to claim her, only to learn the Omega was his enemy's daughter. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your favorite moment. It truly helps more than you know.